coordinating this and that always can be a challenge. There's a little bit of a lag. Okay. Okay, we are live. Howdy, everybody. Today we're going to be doing an introduction with polymer clay for any of you who have not done it and are interested in what polymer clay is all about. I have my friend Patty Pulliam here with me, and she is, there's Patty, and she is a very talented bead artist, not only in polymer clay, but also in lamp working. She's a painter. She does all kinds of very, very cool things. And she's one of the members of our group and a friend in my Bead Buddies group that we get together with. And she's here to give you the lowdown on everything polymer clay. So I'm going to turn this over to her. I'm going to move the camera and get better views for you can so that you can see. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask, and I will relay them to her as she's working. And hopefully you'll learn a lot of cool stuff today. Okay, here we go, Patty.
All right. This is going to be fun.
Yep, let me turn it that way, and then I'm going to move it.
Well, as Sue said, I do like to do a lot of different stuff. We call it art ADD because we can't seem to manage to stick with one thing. You've got to try everything. And so, yes, I do glass lampwork beads. I do polymer clay. I do paper crafts. I do, like she said, I've been dabbling with painting lately, doing some linoleum carving. I don't know, you name it, I've probably tried it at least once. Some things I love and I keep doing, and other things, I might not continue to do, but I have to at least try it once. But I have been doing polymer clay for quite a while now, and I've been asked before to do presentations, and I always think, what is the one word, or how could I quickly describe polymer clay to people? And versatile is the word that comes up for me for polymer clay, because you can do so many different things with it. Today, we're going to have to tighten our focus and just give you an introduction to what it is, because I'm sure there's quite a few of you out there who've never done polymer clay, don't really even know what it is. So I'm going to really go over just the basics to start out. And then after I do the basic stuff today, I will show you some examples of other techniques that we can do. And you guys can decide if you want to see more. And if I want, if you want me to show you demonstrations of other techniques besides just the basic stuff. So whenever Sue's ready.
Okay, I'm just gonna move the camera here. I want to, hi, I want to turn the camera around if I can do that. Somewhere along the line, I know that there's a way to do that. I don't know. Difficulties, as usual. I want to turn the camera around.
Isn't there a little
There isn't.
camera icon anywhere? It's right in the middle.
Is it?
It's right in the middle on the side.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry about
There
that.
we go.
All right,
Okay, so focus on this area if you would.
Let me see. I'm seeing you here. Okay. All right. I think we're good.
Okay.
Take it away.
So the first thing I'm going to tell you is what polymer clay actually is. And many of you might recognize the word polymer, which means plastic. So it is actually a malleable plastic substance. I've read that it's PVC, like you get in pipes and stuff, except for it has a plasticizer in it, so it stays soft and malleable. And then in order to make it hard, you bake it in a regular oven at 275 degrees. So that's one of the benefits over earthenware clay, is that you don't have to have a kiln or anything. You can just use household stuff. So some of the brands that you might find out there, there is one called Fimo, which some people just refer to polymer clay as Fimo. There's a brand called Primo, which is made by a different company. There's one called Kato clay, which was developed by a really well-known and talented polymer clay artist. I tend to use Primo all the time, and that's made by a company called Polyform Products that's here in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. I guess we're in Indiana, but it's close anyway. I think it's a western suburb of Chicago. It's called Polyform Products, and they have several different clays in their line. They have one that's called Sculpey 3, which is really soft, and that's used a lot with kids because it is really soft right out of the package. This one that I use is called Sculpey Primo, and if you look at the package, Sculpey is the biggest name on there, but you have to, if you want to use this kind, you have to make sure you get the one that says Primo across the bottom. And the reason that I use this one is it's a little bit firmer to work with, and it's a little more durable after it's baked. The Sculpey 3 tends to be kind of brittle, and so I really would not recommend using that if you're going to make any kind of jewelry or things that might take a little wear. Again, it's really great for playing with kids. And if you're doing sculptures that don't have little pieces sticking out, then it would be fine. But I would recommend Primo. It's a little bit more of a professional or an adult version of the clay. And it comes in all different colors. There's tons of different colors. And it also, I have just some examples. I have white, I have purple, I have this kind of salmon color. This is it's called aqua, what's it called? This was an aqua metallic, so it's got, you probably can't see it on the screen, but it's got little sparkles in it. They also make some actual metallics, and this one is a silver. And again, I'm not sure if you'd be able to tell that it's a metallic on screen, but this is a silver metallic, and they have gold and bronze and copper metallics as well. This is an older, they keep changing the labeling. This is an older label, and Primo was bigger on this one. And this is some of their most recent labeling. So if you go to your hobby and craft store, this is probably what you'd find. And they come in 2-ounce blocks. And you can also get an 8-ounce block. So black and white, I normally get in these 8-ounce blocks. But they have it at most, hobby stores and art supply stores. And of course, you can order it online. So in terms of working with the clay, you really only need some basic tools. Just like anything else, you can go crazy with the tools and buy like a million different kinds of molds and texture plates and just everything. But you can get away with doing a lot of stuff just with your basic tools. And one of the basic tools is a roller. This is an acrylic roller. They sell these just for working with polymer clay. You need some kind of a needle tool. And this is just a plain needle tool that had a wooden handle, and I actually decorated the handle with clay. I'll talk more about putting clay on things later. You can also, if you don't have a metal needle tool, you can use just a bamboo skewer. And I'll talk about putting holes in beads later, and that's where these will come in handy. One thing that is a little bit specific to clay that you don't usually see in a lot of other craft realms is this, it's a clay blade. It's like an oversized razor blade. So of course you want to be really careful with something like this, and you wouldn't give this type of thing to children to use. They have different kinds of plastic cutters that they sell to use with little kids. But as an adult, a grown-up crafter, we can use these clay blades, and you just have to be really careful with them because again, this edge is quite sharp. So the biggest rule about the clay blade is make sure you look at it before you pick it up. Don't just go feeling around on your table for it. Look at it before you pick it up because you don't want to cut yourself. Another interesting tool that you might be surprised to see is a pasta machine. This is an actual Italian-made pasta machine that I've had forever. I bought it to make pasta when I was 20 something and, thought I was going to be making homemade pasta. And yeah, I think I did it once and put it away. But this is an Italian pasta machine. It might look a little different because there's usually these metal, we call them fenders that go on here that have been taken off. Um, but it is, like I said, it's an Atlas and an Italian made pasta machine. We use this to help what we call condition the clay. When it first comes out of the package, it's a little bit cold and it's a little bit firm. And to get it malleable and get it working, you want to mix the plasticizer up throughout the clay body, and get it kind of a little bit warmed up and a little soft so that it's easier to work with. And you don't absolutely need to have a pasta machine to do that, but it makes it a lot easier. And in fact, they even have motors for them that you can do them electric. I don't happen to use a motor myself. I just use the little crank on here, but they do make the motors for them. If you end up being a person that uses hmm, if you end up being a person that uses polymer clay a lot, you might want to get a motor for your machine because it just makes it a little bit. And I'm checking my notes so that I don't forget to tell you guys stuff because I'm a little nervous, I have to admit.
You shouldn't be nervous
I
here.
know.
Not with me.
I know, but I just am.
I'm the queen of making mistakes and flubs.
I've never done a
During
Facebook
live.
Live before,
Okay,
so
all right.
I'm a little bit nervous about that. So yeah, Sue, holler out if you think I've forgotten something or if you
Okay.
have a question that you think I might have missed.
Okay.
So the first thing that I'm going to demonstrate, again, these are just kind of your basic tools. This is kind of the minimum of what I would want to have in order. Oh, I forgot to talk about my work surface. This is actually a flexible cutting mat from the dollar store. You can use any sort of non-porous smooth surface like a piece of glass or a piece of glazed ceramic. Those are a couple of things that are really good to use. I like these because they're plastic, they're cheap, and they're flexible and lightweight because I sometimes take my stuff around and work at different places. And a big 4x4 ceramic tile is nice, but it's heavy. And so if you're hauling around all this stuff, it's nice to have something that's lightweight. And underneath it, I just have a grid that has inches and it's divided up into quarter and eighth inches. And it's just to help me if I want to measure, like if I'm trying to get beads to match or something and I want to measure it, it's just kind of nice to have that. But it's just tucked underneath my work surface. So you can just put a piece of grid paper under there or not. You don't have to have that, but it's just kind of handy. So yeah, just a note about work surfaces. Polymer clay does have a live plasticizer in it, meaning it's a material or a chemical that makes plastic soft. And so you don't want to have your clay laying on like a wooden surface, like especially you don't want to have it on a nice dining room table or something, because it might eat through the surface of your table. It might eat through the finish. And so you always want to make sure that you keep your clay on your work surface, or we often use deli sheets, plastic deli sheets. I've got some I'll show you. I've got a few sheets of clay over here. And whenever I have things that I'm putting to the side or I'm storing, I'm using these plastic deli sheets to store it just because I don't want that plasticizer touching any nice surfaces. But glass, plastic, metal, those kind of things are okay. You don't have to worry about those. Or ceramic tiles, like I said. Okay, so I mentioned that the clay needs to be conditioned. I'll tell you a little story. The very first time that I tried to use polymer clay, I bought some polymer clay and I took it out of the package and I tried to smush it up and and it just wouldn't soften. It was really hard and I couldn't get it to be manipulated very well. And I threw it away and I got really frustrated and I didn't touch it for a long time. And then some of you might remember the Carol Duvall show. And I watched that show and I saw people on there demonstrating polymer clay and they talked about conditioning the clay, getting it a little warmed up, getting it softened, getting that plasticizer equally distributed through the clay, and that made a world of difference. So this is something that's important that is not an instinctive or an intuitive thing to do. So that's where the pasta machine comes in, but you can also do it by hand if you don't have a pasta machine. You can use your roller and you can use your hands. And if you happen to have warm hands, that's even better because that'll help to get your clay working faster. So one thing about pasta machines, if you've never used one, it's got a little dial on the end of here. And when you turn the dial, it changes the distance between the rollers. And on this pasta machine, number one is the widest opening. And usually I'd like to do my conditioning on the number one setting. Some pasta machines, different brands, the numbers are backwards. And so like number 7 or number 8 is the widest setting. But most of the time, if you watch tutorials, they'll just mention thrust the rollers if it's too wide. So what I do is take my blade, and again, you always look at your blade first before you pick it up, and I'm going to cut the clay into thinner pieces before I run it through my machine. And it's okay if they're not even pieces, because we're going to be smushing this all through the clay. Kind of the general rule I go is that I don't put anything that's twice as thick, any more than twice as thick as the opening through there. So this piece right here would be probably about the fattest piece I would ever put through. And I often, try to cut it a little bit thinner. And again, it doesn't matter if these things aren't even when we're putting them through, because they're all going to get smushed together. So I just put the piece through the machine, and it just rolls it kind of flat. And I'm just going to put these pieces through. Now, if little pieces break off, don't worry about it. You can just push them back together. And you see how it's kind of crumbly right now? That's okay. I just, take my clay and I pick up any of the little pieces, put them back together, and I keep rolling it through. Now, when you fold the clay to roll it through again, you want to put the fold on the rollers. One of the things that you want to keep in mind when you're putting polymer clay, I keep wanting to call it pasta clay now. When you're rolling your polymer clay through the rollers, is that you don't want to trap air inside your clay. Because if you trap air inside there, when it bakes, it'll make a bubble. So I fold it in half and I put the folded side through on the rollers, or if you don't put the folded side through, you put one of the ends through. And see how I don't smash it down? I leave a little bit of opening there so the air can push out. I can put it in this way. The only way that I really don't want to put it through the machine is this way, because some of the air could get trapped up there. So that's really the only way. I can put it in this way, or fold first. Now, if you do get a bubble in there, I don't have a bubble in there, but let's just say that I can tell that I trapped some air in there. You can take your needle tool and just poke it to let the air out if you do get a bubble in there. Now, if you're working on a final project and you notice an air bubble, then you probably aren't really going to want to stab it with your needle tool, because it would mess up whatever surface that you created. So that's one of the reasons you try not to catch air in it in the first place. So see how it was really, really crumbly at first? See how it's starting to get a little smoother? I mean, it's still kind of crumbly on the edges, but it's not nearly as bad as it was. It's starting to get a little bit smoother. And I usually tend to fold the crumbly edges sort of inward so that it blends in with the rest of the clay. And then eventually, and I turn it sideways, like I'll roll it sideways and I'll roll it. So that time I rolled it that way. This time I'm going to roll it this way. Now, if you need to do this by hand and you don't have a pasta machine, what you can do, now if you do have to, I know I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but I want to just say, if you need to fold this in half and crease that down, start in the middle and kind of work your way out. So again, you're not trapping any air in there. And I'm going to fold it this way. And again, I'm going to start in the middle and push my way out. So if you have to do this by hand, how you would do it is you would just scrunch it up in your hands. Might be a little hard at first, but then I would twist it and scrunch it up in my hands some more. I tend to have warm hands, so I tend to not have too much trouble conditioning clay because, again, warm hands. I wouldn't make a good pastry chef, but I can do polymer clay. And so kind of squish it up, take your rolling pin, and you can use this, a wine bottle. If you don't have a roller like this, you can use a wine bottle or something like that. I'm not sure. You could maybe use a drinking glass, but I'd be a little concerned about how hard you'd want to push on a drinking glass because that might break. But I'm folding it and I'm rolling it and I'm folding it. And I'm basically doing kind of the same thing that I'd be doing with the pasta machine, only I'm doing it by hand. But you can see that this will take longer and will take a lot more hand strength. So you can kind of see why maybe you'd want a pasta machine. Now, I mentioned that mine was an actual pasta machine that was made in Italy for making actual pasta. They do make a craft version of it that you can buy in your craft stores like Michael's. And it's made, most of them I think are made by a company called Amico, but there might be other manufacturers, but they're called clay machines. And they are made in China. And so they're not quite as durable as the Italian made ones, but if you're just a hobby polymer clay person and you don't want to invest in an Italian made machine, they'd be fine. You sometimes can find the actual Italian made pasta machines at like thrift stores and garage sales. I've gotten several in those venues for, maybe $10 or $15. If you can find an Italian made one, I would highly recommend it. They're just much more better quality than the craft ones. But if all you can do is a craft one, then that's great too. So see how this has gotten like a lot more flexible. It's really hard to describe the difference in the feel of it on this, and I can't really show you the difference in how it feels. But one thing maybe I can show you that will give you the idea of how much softer it is see you have a lot less cracking now on the edges than we did at first. You might still get a little bit of cracking on the edges, but I wouldn't worry about that at this point. Depending on what you're making, you can cut those off, so you don't have to really worry about that. But the idea is to get it soft and pliable. So if it's reasonably soft and pliable, and we always end up tending to talk about food when I work with clay and stuff. And so I want to say maybe like one of those fruit leathers, see how it's like much more floppy and pliable. So anyway, so let's see. I think one of the first things I'm going to talk about is color mixing, because I said this stuff does come in a huge variety of colors, but you can also mix colors just like you would mix paint. The same color mixing rules apply. So if you, like, let's just say I didn't have any purple clay and I wanted purple clay, I can mix, this is kind of a pink and a blue, and I can mix those together and I can make a purple. And I've actually got some, not the exact same colors, but I've got a couple of pieces that I've conditioned already. And I will show you how you can easily mix colors. Now that's something I just want to show you. I had those kind of stuck together. You also want to try not to have your clay touching, because it's possible that it might stick together to where you can't get it apart, or some of the color might come off of one and go onto another. So that's another reason to have those deli sheets all over the place. Those things are really handy to have. So I'm just going to mix a little bit just to show you. You could actually, there's a whole book out there on color mixing. So you can really go crazy with color mixing, and you can like measure how much of each color you use. And so you, like, if you make a line of something and you want to be able to reproduce the color that you make, there are techniques that you can use to measure, okay, this is how much pink I used, and I used, pink number, whatever, straight out of the block. And then I used, how many parts of the blue that I used. You can do all that stuff to keep track, but I tend to not do that. I just tend to take scraps and mix them together and see what happens. I like to just play a little bit. So I've got the two different colors, and I'm just going to like mix them together. Like, I'm trying to think of a analog to what we're doing here. Maybe Play-Doh, because you wouldn't really do this with earthenware clay, because the color from earthenware usually comes in from glazing. The clay body usually is not color. Although I've seen some earthenware clay people doing some things with color clay now, which is really interesting. But I twist it, I smush it together, maybe roll it into a snake, and I twist it some more, and I fold it up. Now this is also called marbling. So if I wanted to make some things, I'll show you some things that I've made a little bit later, but this is an example of a cabochon that I made where I sort of marbled the clay. If you want to do marbling, this is how you start doing it. So if I really wanted to keep these stripes, I could just roll it into a bead right now. That's not a very good bead because it's not stuck together really good. But my point is, if you want to do the marbling, which I'm going to do a little bit more of later, you could stop at this point. But I'm going to keep going because I want to actually make purple, which happens to be my favorite color, if you hadn't noticed. So I'm basically just keep smushing it together, roll it into a snake. See how the color is starting to blend more? Fold it in half, roll it some more, squish it together. You can also blend clay by rolling it through your pasta machine. This is such a small piece that it's kind of silly to use the pasta machine. But you can keep folding and rolling and folding and rolling and folding and rolling and folding and rolling and mix your color using the pasta machine. But I actually find it faster to do it by hand because it'll just take a really long time to thoroughly mix it if you're just using the pasta machine. So, see how it's still got some swirls in it. See, I got a little speck of white on there, but don't worry about that. It's still got a few swirls in there, but it's almost to purple. And depending on whether you want a bluer purple or a more red purple, you might want to put, a little more blue in or a little more pink in, just depending on what particular shade of purple you're looking for. Yeah, so that's pretty good. I think I've pretty much gotten it all the way mixed now. So that's just an example that some people like to get just your basic fundamental colors. You'll get the magenta, the cyan, and some, what is it? What's the third one? Yellow, duh. Might just get cyan, magenta, and yellow clay, and they might custom mix their whole palette. That's an option if you're really into color and you're really into controlling your own colors. That might be something you want to do. Otherwise, like I said, you could buy just about any color that you would want. Um, and you can also do surface techniques too to change the colors. You can put, some people do sculpting, like maybe dolls and stuff, and then they paint. You can paint these with acrylic paint. I don't do that myself, but I know some people will paint with acrylic paint. They'll just use like a basic white or taupe clay and treat it more like they would maybe earthenware clay, sculpt their item and then paint it afterwards. Um, and then you can use mica powders, and you can use like rub and buff, all kinds of different things. And I'm trying to focus because I tend to want to go off on tangents and talk about like you could do this and you could do that and you could do this other thing, but I'm going to try to keep it down to kind of your basics today because I don't want to get anybody too confused. Okay, so that's color mixing. So I've gone over the different brands, the basic tools, what conditioning is, color mixing. Now, I'm going to show you how to make just some basic beads. That's what I tend to make, is I tend to make jewelry items, um, beads, pendants, pins, different things like that, components to make jewelry out of. And so that's what I'm going to show you is how to make some basic beads. Or, I showed you the cabochon. I don't have a cabochon mold with me today, but you can make, you can use a mold to make a cabochon, or you can hand shape them yourself. Um, But yeah, I'm going to just do some swirls. I'll do the marbling I was telling you about. And I'll do some swirls, and then I'll show you how to make some basic beads and the proper way to drill holes in them. And there's also kind of a cool swirly technique that I will show you. I think that Sue took a picture of a bowl of the swirly beads that I had, and I think she posted that up. But
I haven't posted it yet,
oh, you
but I
haven't?
will.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'll show you how to make these swirly lentil beads. This is go all the way and mix it into a homogeneous color, your clay. And I usually recommend make sure you have a little bit of contrast. If I just did these two colors, there's a little bit of contrast to these two colors. This one's a little more saturated than that one. But if I throw some white in there, you're going to see the differences in the colors a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of the pink, and I'm going to take roughly the same amount of the blue, and then I'm going to take a little bit of the white. And again, when I press these together, I know I'm harping on the whole don't get bubbles in there, but I believe in trying to develop good habits right from the get-go. So if I know there's something that might get to be a bugaboo later, that can be a pain in the butt later, if I can just show you an easy way to avoid that right from the get-go, I like to do that. I do the same thing when I teach glass bead making. I try to teach really good habits right from the get-go. So again, for this, since I'm marbling it, I don't care that I'm getting little bits of white on the pink and vice versa. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tear this into pieces because I want all these colors to swirl and mix, not mix together, but just swirl next to each other, marble next to each other. So I'm going to squish it, roll it, very similar to what I was doing when I was color mixing, only I'm not going to take it all the way. So I'm twisting it and I'm going to fold it again. And this is something that you can pay attention to when you're doing it, how far you want to take your swirls. Some people like to have big chunks of each different color, and other people like to have kind of fine lines. Trying to think if there's most of these that I'm showing, I kind of have some fairly fine lines. These have more than just 3 colors in them, and they have some of the metallic in there. I'll talk a little bit more about the techniques on these later, but yeah, it just depends. Do you want big chunky stripes of color? Then you might want to stop here. If you want the stripes to be a little bit more delicate, then you just keep mixing. So I'm squishing and I'm rolling and I'm twisting. And when you get it to a point that you like it, then you can stop. If you kind of think, oh, I don't have as much blue as I want in there, or I want more pink in there, or whatever, you can also stop and make of pink in here if you wanted more pink or more blue. This stuff, it's all up to you. You can make all the decisions. So the way I've got it right now, thicker stripes, and then I've got some thinner stripes. And I think maybe I want to stop at this point because I'm afraid if I go too much further that it might start blending. It might start getting to the point where I'm mixing the color together instead of having swirls. So now I'm going to squish it. So when I twisted it, it sort of like wanted to separate into these little pieces, but I don't want it to do that. So I'm going to push it back together. Make sure that it's all stuck together here. And if you roll it on the table, I roll it through. One suggestion is roll with your palm instead of your fingers, because if you roll with your fingers, you might get finger grooves in it. So you want to roll it with your palm. And don't push down really hard. If you push down really hard, you're going to get a flat side. And you don't really want a flat side. This actually kind of has a little bit of a flat side, so I'm going to try to round it up a little bit more. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some beads, and I'm just going to cut pieces off of here. So I'm looking at my blade, picking it up, and here's where your grid might come in handy. If you want to make a bunch of beads that are about the same size, if your snake is approximately the same thickness, then you can just measure how much you're cutting with your little grid. Now I'm going to actually twist this end a little bit more because I don't like how that part looks. So I'm going to twist that end a little bit more. If your snake gets too fat, you actually can kind of push inward as you roll, and you can actually make your snake a little shorter too. That's something that I didn't know you could do until I started working with polymer clay. I always thought, if you're going to roll a snake, it's just going to get long and skinny. But if you're pushing inward, see how I made it from a long skinny one up to kind of a short fat one? So I like those twists better than I liked that before. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut some chunks of clay off. See what the inside looks like. Isn't that cool? Can you see that?
Yep, it's great.
Yeah, it starts. Some people actually like to cut it open and use the inside part versus the outside part. In fact, I'm going to take a little piece down here. I'm going to save this little piece and I'm going to show you something with that in a little bit. But if you wanted to get a bunch of beads that matched, I would say, let's just say we'll make 4 big chunky beads. So this is about 2 inches long. It's about the same diameter. So I'm just going to cut 4 pieces that are each a 1/2 inch long. So that's where a grid thing comes in handy underneath your work surface, because that way you can see, that just looks so cool inside. So you're going to get this and this as part of your bead. Now here's a little hint. Everybody knows that you roll clay in your hand, right, to make a ball. I learned that if you just roll it in one direction, that you're going to get more of a football shape. But if you roll it in one direction and then roll it back, and then roll it this way, and then roll it this way, that you're going to tend to get more of a round, almost not, I shouldn't say perfectly spherical, because, we don't really need perfection, do we? But you're going to get more of a spherical bead than if you just roll it in one direction. So I'm going to put that one down, and I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to roll it this way, then I'm going to roll it this way, and I'm just going to go back and forth a few times. And I might just, use my fingers to just make sure that it's nice and round. Again, I wouldn't worry too much about perfection, because I think we worry too much about perfection, to be honest with you. I think we should just kind of go with the flow, enjoy the serendipity of the whole thing. So you can see that was where the cut edge was, and we've got a really interesting pattern there. And then we've got some interesting swirls going on there. So I'm going to roll the other 2, and then I'm going to show you a cool technique for putting the holes in beads. And a little bit later, I will talk about how to bake beads. So, all right, so there's number 3, and then here's number 4. All right, so see how these 4 beads are just about the same size? So that's a trick on how you can get basically the same size beads if you wanted to make a set. And if you wanted to make some that were smaller, then you maybe cut some at 3/8 and some at 1/8, and starting out with that even snake, and then you can cut the different sizes if you wanted to have graduated size beads. So that's kind of a trick to do that.
Yeah, those look great.
So I will show you how to poke a hole. Now, I use this metal tool quite often, and if I'm doing a smaller bead, I would probably poke the hole with this. But because this is sort of a big chunky bead, I probably want to have a larger hole in it. So I'm going to poke the hole with this bamboo skewer, or as some people say, skewer. I've heard one lady call them skewers.
Skewers.
You can use a little if you just jammed it in there. So one thing you want to keep in mind is, what is your prettiest side of the bead? What part do you want to show the most? And I think that I want these swirly edges to show a little bit more. So I want my hole to go through this way. So one of the nice things about these skewers is they actually are a little bit rough, slightly rough on that end. So I actually drill it in. I don't push it straight through. I drill it in. And so I look at my bead and I see how I'm turning the skewer and I'm drilling it. But I'm also going to turn the bead every once in a while because I want to make sure I'm centering that hole right in the middle of this bead. So I'm going to turn the bead every once in a while to make sure that from all angles it's centered. So I'm going to drill it, and then I'm going to put my finger over on this side. So as soon as that tip of that skewer pops out this side, I'm going to back it out, because I'll tell you what, if you drill in, you're going to get a nice clean hole on this side. But if you just kept drilling in and popped it out that side, see how it's already starting to pop out? You're going to get kind of a blowout on that side, and it's not going to be very neat. And I go back toward my original hole. And that way you've got a nice clean hole on both sides. Okay, so that's how you drill the skewer, kind of going that way. You can stop when it just hits the outside and then recenter it, and it'll meet somewhere in the middle. So you can center up your hole a little bit better if you accidentally are going off centered. I'm hoping all of this is making sense.
Oh, I think it makes perfect sense.
Okay, good. Okay, so that's just a really basic swirl bead, little marbled. You can use as many different colors of clay as you want to. You can use the metallics. You can use, like I said, however many different colors. For these, I believe that I used for most of these. And this was really a marbled piece. And I took the marbled clay and I rolled it through the pasta machine, and it made stripes, which is kind of neat.
That's a very pretty
I think I
piece.
can show you. Well, and the other thing that this one has resin on it. I put a little UV resin on the surface, so if you see, it's shiny.
Oh yeah, that looks
And it
great.
also brings out that metallic. There's a little bit of metallics in this one. This one is mostly metallic. Whoops. You can see from this side how that was really just a bunch of scrap clay. But when I shaped it into the cabochon, I highlighted the stripes. And this is the same clay, just the clay. And this is the same clay with some of the UV resin on top of it. So it really, especially with the metallics,
It really makes it pop.
Brings it out.
Yeah.
You also can sand and buff these and make it really shiny that way too. And there are some situations where sanding and buffing would be better, but to get a really easy shine, the UV resin is really good. But yeah, these are just, most of the stuff that I do that I marble is scrap. It's just scrap clay that I just, mix up together. So I'll show you some more. This actually really reminds me of, have you guys ever heard of Fordite?
Oh, I have.
Yeah, it's the paint that's chipped off the walls of the painting booths that they paint cars. So it's enamel paint that they painted cars with. And all the overspray, they chip it off the walls. And somebody got a bright idea to cut those pieces up and polish them and make beads and cabochons out of them. Well, this is not that, but for some reason it just kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, it has that look.
Yeah. And so these are, again, marbled beads, but I cut these into funky shapes. Instead of rolling them into circles, I just cut them in funky shapes and drilled the holes through them. And I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I have an awful lot of beads and stuff that I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I like making the components. I am not as much of a fan of making the finished jewelry out of it.
I hear you completely.
That's why, like, this piece is just on a rubber rope.
Yeah. Now, someone asked me about that.
Okay.
Is that polymer clay?
This is polymer clay.
Okay.
We had an exchange in a group. We have the Chicago Area Polymer Clay Guild, And we have an annual retreat every fall, and we do an exchange, and we were doing what's called an inchy exchange. And whatever final piece you make, it can be any design that you want, it just needs to be an inch square. And so this is the inchy that I made a few years ago that I had extras that I just made into a pendant. I just put a loop on the back. I put a frame around it and put a loop on the back. And
Yeah.
I just have it hanging from a rubber cord. I just tend to not make very much jewelry out of it. I make, as I showed Sue earlier, I have a gazillion beads and stuff, and I just don't make finished stuff. So I know we're getting kind of close to an hour. So as I told you guys, I can talk about this for days. So, but I want to go over a couple of things before I finish up. In addition to beads, and of course I said cabochons, and they do make cabochon molds, or you can just take a circle and cut it in half. You know, you can roll a big ball and cut it in half, and you can shape them by hand if you want. These are technically cabochons, but they're funny shapes. They're long, narrow ones, and I just cut that myself. I didn't use a mold for this one. Don't know what I'm going to do with it.
The
So
fun is in the making.
exactly. So once you have your pieces made, whatever it is that you're making, you have to bake it. Um, it's called curing because it's not technically baking because this clay is plastic. It doesn't have any water in it. And usually when you're baking something, you're burning the water out of it. But that's not really what you're doing. But we still call it baking, even though it's technically curing. But you have to bake it in order to make that plasticizer inert and make it so it's hard. Because as you can see, these pieces are hard. Um, so all you need to do is bake it in an oven at 275 degrees. Now, I highly recommend that you follow the instructions on whatever clay that you get, because if you get Fimo or you get Kato polyclay, the instructions might be slightly different. I think one of them maybe bakes at 300 degrees, and this is Fahrenheit. Primo bakes at 275 degrees, which is 130 Celsius. And they recommend that you bake it for at least 30 minutes per half inch of thickness. And that just makes sure that everything is thoroughly baked. These beads are a half inch across, so I would recommend baking these for at least an hour. The nice thing about polymer clay is that if you know that your oven is at 275 degrees, because you're going to want to have a thermometer in there. You should have a thermometer in your oven even if you're baking food, because ovens are notoriously wrong in their temperatures. As long as you know that that oven's at 275, you could bake it for days. Now, nobody's going to do that, but you could. So you don't have to worry. As long as the temperature stays correct, you can bake these for as long as you want to. And you can rebake it. Some people make sculptural items where they put parts of it on and they don't want to squish that while they're doing other parts. So they'll bake it one time and then they come back and they put more clay on it and then they can bake it again. And again, as long as your temperature stays consistent at 275, you're golden. You can bake it as often as you want to. Once in a blue moon, some of the really super light colors like the white or the beige or the ecru might brown just ever so slightly. So some people will put a tint over those if they're concerned. But that's the only time that I'd be concerned about that. You can use your home oven. This is considered non-toxic material, although you cannot use it for items that will come in contact with food. Now you can put it on the handle of a serving spoon or on the outside of a glass, but nothing that comes in contact with your mouth or comes in contact with food. It's not rated food safe, but it is a non-toxic. My theory on that is they just don't want to go through all the trouble that you'd have to go through with all the federal organizations that you'd have to do to get it considered food safe. But yeah, so you can use your oven. What a lot of polymer clay artists do is they will get a toaster oven, not one of the little short guys, but those ones that are about this high. They'll get a toaster oven and they use that specifically for their polymer clay. And they can have that in their workroom with them, so they can just put their stuff right in their oven right next to them. Um, So yeah, after you get done figuring all your stuff out and making your items, then you always want to bake them. And once they're baked, they're good. One thing to keep in mind though, I'm touching all of these things even though I have polymer clay on my fingers. You really kind of don't want to touch your finished work too much when you've got like raw polymer clay on your fingers. And I'll give you an example why. This is my needle tool, and this handle used to be shiny. I had sanded it and buffed it, and it used to be really shiny. But because I'm touching it all the time after I'm touching raw polymer clay, it's gotten dull again because the that plasticizer, that live plasticizer in there is on my fingers and gets on your work. So if you're going to go from working with raw polymer clay to working with some of your finished items, you're going to want to wash your hands first because you don't want to get that plasticizer on your clay. Now, real quick, storing clay, I use little pieces of that. I cut up little pieces of that deli wrap, and I wrap it around there. Now, it doesn't have to be really tight because it isn't going to air dry because it doesn't have any water in it. But you just don't want it getting stuck. You know, you don't want all your different colors stuck together, and you also don't want it to possibly eat into the box that you're storing it in. So I just really recommend getting some of this deli wrap. You can buy those in boxes at a lot of different places, and just wrapping up your pieces. You can use saran wrap too, I believe, but I always have a lot of this deli wrap around, so I use that. So real quick before we end, I want to just show you guys some different ideas that you can do with polymer clay. And these, if you're interested in any of these designs, we can do additional shows, additional lives, additional demos in the future. Um,
These have really got my attention.
oh, okay.
These that look like wood.
Yeah. So one of the many things that polymer clay is good for is imitating other materials. And this one is referred to as faux ivory or faux wood. And once you do the technique, like these two have been antiqued. I used some burnt umber acrylic paint, and I've made like little dots and little cuts in it because I want it to look like it's been in a treasure chest for years, you know. And so I made little cuts and dots on it, and then I put the dark paint on it to antique it and make it look old. So you can imitate wood. I tried to make this one look like an old tooth or a
Looks great.
tusk or something. Um, you can also make it look like different kinds of natural stones. So this is what's referred to as faux jade. And if you'll notice, this is what it looks like when you first bake it, but after, if you sand it and buff it, you can make it look really shiny. And I've held these up to some real jade beads, and they look really close. And you can make your green, you know, any tint of green that you want. You can do malachite, you can do turquoise, you can do lapis lazuli, you can just do all these different colors or different stones, I should say. So those are some imitative techniques. You can use clay. I mentioned molds for doing cabochons. There's tons of different molds out there for working with polymer clay, and there's texture sheets. And so this was done in a mold. This was rolled on a texture sheet, and this has mica powder on it. I don't know if you guys have run across mica powder before, but it's mica is actually, it's a mineral that they grind super, super, super white. Since it was black clay, I used white acrylic paint to highlight. So you can shape things. You can make buttons and beads, and these will probably be pins at some point. So you can also do screen printing. I believe the Polyform company makes screen prints that they sell specifically for polymer clay, and these have metallic paint on top of them. These can be cabochons. There's a tool that they sell that has bumps on it so that you can shape. So these could either be cabochons or you could. These are the wrong sizes, but if you did two the same size, you could put them together and make hollow beads. Let's see what else. Oh, you want to talk about that one? This one, this isn't the best presentation for this, but you can make kind of stained glass windows with polymer clay. These little bits are made with, they have a clay called translucent, and it's not clear when it's baked, but it's more translucent than something like this, which of course is opaque. And so if I had these little pieces up against a light, you could see through them. But I also used them to make kind of a sculptural thing as well, making like little flowers and such.
Yeah, I think that's really pretty.
Yeah. So then a couple of my favorite techniques, one of them is called mica shift. So I mentioned mica being a mineral. Um, the metallic clay that they sell actually has mica in it. And if you manipulate it in a certain way, this is kind of it's like trompe l'oeil. It's like I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but it's an optical illusion because that's actually perfectly flat, although it looks like it's dimensional.
Right.
And so you're playing with the mica in the clay. Now this has been sanded and buffed, which really highlights the metallic clay a lot. This one has the same technique. It's flat, but it just hasn't been sanded and buffed yet. So you don't quite see the same you don't see it as clearly. If I sanded and buffed that, you would see it like super clearly. So that's a really cool technique that I like a lot. And there's another one that's called Makume Gane, which if you're a metal worker, you might have heard of it. It's a technique that Japanese developed in metalwork where they layer different colors of metal and then they manipulate it and then sand off the surface so that you can see all the layers. And this one has a little metal leaf in it. So you see as some of those metal layers come up with the metal leaf, you can see bits of the metal leaf. This one, this was a cool thing that a friend had. It came out of a container of coffee pods, and it was this plastic thing that had concentric circles and then like radial lines. And so I made a stack of the clay and then pushed that thing through it, shaved off the pieces, and then that's what you get. You get this really cool layered technique. And of course, if I do a demo on it, it'll make a lot more sense than it's making right now. But I just think it's a very cool looking technique. And there's lots more stuff too. This is just kind of scratching the surface. Um, People make dolls. A lot of people out there work with polymer clay and make dolls. They'll make hands and faces out of polymer clay and then, sew the bodies or make the full dolls out of them. People make miniature food. That's a big thing that people do with polymer clay. I don't, like I might have mentioned before, I don't do a lot of sculptural stuff myself, but you can obviously do things in sculptural form. I made this thing. I don't know what it is I'm going to use it for, but I might, make a pinnacle ivory again. I just don't know what that is. But sometimes I just like to play, I just like to play with it. It can kind of look like leather. I think that was the concept that I was going for here with the brown, is that, this is maybe a tooth or something that was wrapped in leather. I have made a little imitation barrel out of this wood and made what looks like rusty metal straps on it. That turned out pretty cool. Oh, I didn't mention caning. Caning is another thing that a lot of people do, and I can explain more about it if we do a segment on caning. But caning, I'm sure most of you guys have seen those cookies that they sell at Christmas, the sugar cookies that come in a log, and every time you slice it, there's a Christmas tree or something in it. That's what a cane is. It comes from glass working, but we can do it in clay too. And here's an example of a real simple cane called a spiral. But no matter where I cut it along the line, it's going to have a spiral. So and people do really complex canes. I've seen whole Christmas scenes that people have done in a big old cane. But this one is just a little like kitty footprint that I made in a cane, and I made the slices and I put them on this bottle. Which brings me to one more thing, and then I promise you that I will wind this up. You wind me up and I talk all day. You can put clay on other items as long as they can be baked in the oven at 275 degrees. As I mentioned, I covered this needle tool. It had a wooden handle. Wood can handle 275 in the oven. This is decorated on a glass bottle. The glass can handle 275 in the oven. Um, so anything that you can bake in an oven at 275, you can put clay on. One of the classes that I teach is decorating a pen. Now, I don't have a pen that doesn't have clay on it here, but we know it's a plastic pen, but we know that this specific brand and style of pen you can put in the oven and it won't melt or warp. And you do bake it without the ink in it, but you can decorate this type of pen, and then when it's cool, you can put the ink back in it, and then you'll have a one of a kind pen. So there's tons of stuff that you can put clay on. People will take wooden picture frames and put clay on those, and I mean, there's just so many different things that you can do.
No, show this bottle. I think
Okay.
it's so pretty.
There is a program that this lady on the East Coast started called Bottles of Hope. She was a breast cancer survivor, and she noticed when she was going to get her chemo that medicine came in little glass bottles. And being a polymer clay artist, she's like, I could put clay on those bottles. And so she decided to start a program called Bottles of Hope, because the little bottles, the little medicine bottles, are your hope for recovery in cancer. So we started doing these, and there's been thousands and maybe millions, you never know, of bottles made. This is one that I made a few weeks ago using that faux wood technique, and then just a little sculpting. I just did a little grass and a little sign in the grass, and you make a little lid that goes on it. And these are not actually medicine bottles, but we get them from a science and surplus place that sells these little bottles. We do actually get some medicine bottles sometimes, but you have to get the kind that is non-toxic. You have to, of course, be careful about that. But what we do is after we create them, and here's the other one, and you can decorate them in any way you want to. As we give them to cancer patients, we go to some of the local cancer wards at different hospitals, and we give them all these bottles, and they hand them out to the patients. And apparently the patients love them. They're fun. And there's a little poem we put in with them, and they're just a fun thing to do. And from an artistic standpoint, it's fun to try to figure out how to decorate these little bottles, to try to do something interesting. I made one that looked like a little pumpkin. Like I said, I made one that looked like a barrel. Some people make this into a head and make little dolls out of them. And
That's a cute idea.
sometimes you just decorate them with designs. It doesn't have to be like a figurative thing. But yeah, and so if any of you guys are interested, you can go to capcg.org. That is the Chicago Area Polymer Clay Guild. And there's more information about us in there. Or you can go to bottlesofhope.org.
I'll post those. I'll post those
Okay.
links.
So
There.
I think that's it. There's so much more, but we only have so much time. So
Yeah.
this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to try to dial it in and focus a little tighter on one thing because I could go nuts. But if you have any questions, go ahead and post them on the thread. I'm in that group all the time. So if you have any questions or if there's something you're particularly interested in, just let me know.
Okie dokie.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Patty. Bye-bye.